Hello YouTube, thanks for checking out the video. Today we're going to be talking about the Bluejay. This is a 9x12 oil painting of course, a Bluejay. It's on your typical canvas that you can buy at almost any art store, and I applied a layer of gesso on it off camera, and right now you're seeing me start off with a wash of yellow ochre and burnt umber. And it's mostly just Gamsol. Well, it's only Gamsol that I'm using. I'm just dabbing into paint very lightly, keeping it very kind of watery. I suppose it's almost like a watercolor at this early stage. I know the angle of the camera is a little off to the side. This is just the setup that I have, but I'm hoping to get better equipment and get a fancier setup soon. So at this very early stage of the painting, while the canvas is still wet, this is where I block in the composition. I'm just trying to make sure that I can fit the entire bird on the canvas in the first place, because one of the worst things that can happen is that you commit to a drawing only to realize a day later there's something compositionally off about the painting. You can't really figure out why, and it's because because the drawing is off. So this is even though it looks like this is the fastest and loosest, sketchiest part of the process, and it is, but it's also the most important, because here, like, any small mistake is going to turn into a much larger issue later on. Anyway, so here we are with the bird. It's starting, okay, I'm starting to feel a little comfortable with where things are being placed, and as soon as I sketched in like that, the top portion, like the head, and it kind of has like this kind of like this sweet, charming look to it, I'm like, okay, I think this is gonna work. And here we are with the block-in finished. Now, I probably spent no more than 5 minutes. It probably took me just about as much time to create the block-in as it took me to record talking about blocking it in. So it was a very quick, you do it pretty fast, and you do it while the Gamsol is still wet. Alright, in the next part of the painting, so I'm just still blocking things in. I'm still kind of loosely defining where things are at. I am neither drawing nor painting at this point. I hesitate to even call it that. What I'm doing is that I'm just laying in shapes. I'm laying in shapes and I'm laying in blocks of color. So just like in the first part where I was blocking in the composition, now I'm blocking in the color composition. Now the artwork that I'm trying to create is still very much early in its stages, but as you can see, like, by the choice of values that I'm making here, is that now that the bird has started to be sculpted or drawn in a little bit more, I'm not using very dark colors or very light colors. I'm keeping the values somewhere around the mid-range. Now I know that it looks like I'm using dark colors to draw the bird in, but it is kind of dark, but it's not the darkest that I know that I eventually want to get to. So I'm not going to either extreme. Right now, the brightest part of the painting is that initial wash of the canvas, that I think it was the raw sienna that was diluted with Gamsol and eventually removed with some paper towel. But that's still the lightest part. And I know, like, right around, like, underneath the beak, as well as some parts of the wing and the tail and the eye, that I know that that's going to eventually be the darkest part of the painting. But I'm not going full dark. I'm staying away from both black and white at this point. I'm trying to keep things somewhere around the middle. And I started putting in some of the blue sort of highlights of the bird, but I'm still keeping things very loose, keeping things very sort of like a watery, quote-unquote watery, or not really going for full-on saturation just yet. I still want to be able to be flexible in terms of the values. Now that we have a sketch of the painting, I normally sleep on it overnight, and when I wake up in the morning, I'll generally know after some time has passed, yeah, I feel this is worth painting now. So this next stage of the painting is now we're actually drawing, we're actually painting. And when I go back to a painting, once I'm happy with the sketch, I started off with the dark parts of the painting, and this time I'm going a little bit darker than I went before. Hence is the reason why I save the lightest and the darkest values until I'm actually painting. So once I do the darkest parts of the painting first, now I sort of have like a measuring stick of like, okay, exactly what cannot be darker than this. And then so also I am playing around with the midtones. Now this is kind of another tricky part of the painting where it always kind of feels like you're getting a little lost, but you got to trust your artistic instinct and know that just as long as you feel comfortable in your talent and your skill, it will guide you through this part of the painting, because this middle part of the painting is always sort of the scariest part, because it will often feel like you're losing control of the painting, but rest assured that you're not. Another important aspect of this phase of the painting, when you're finally actually applying paint to the canvas and not just Gamsol, is you have to be careful of overconfidence. So one, you want to be confident in your skill and your artistic abilities, but you also don't want to be too overconfident, too cocky, because that could blind you from what you're actually creating and the mistakes that you're making. So it's good to every now and then really take a look at, assess, like, are you really honestly happy with where this is going? And if you're not, okay, you have two choices. You can either scrub the painting out and start over, or you could persevere and see if you can make things work out. And unfortunately, that's always going to happen. No matter how good of an artist you are, you're always going to come to a crossroads at some point where you're unsure if this is going in a direction that you initially have in mind. So you either persevere and you keep working on it, or you have to scrap the painting and recognize that, you know what, I'm better off just starting anew. Actually happened to me once, so this is the second attempt. I feel you can learn just as much from a failed painting as you can from a successful painting. In this final portion of the artwork, this is where you're really painting. You're using paint very liberally. You're not mixing it with Gamsol. It's almost paint straight out of the tube mixed in with other paint, or mixed in with a little bit of medium. I think I was using linseed oil for this. I started off with just straight up white, like especially around the head, because I just like how I started off with like the very darkest part in the previous section. I always save the highlights for the last step. And I knew that the background was going to be just an abstract background. I didn't want the background to compete with the bird, so it is a bit of an abstract setting. I did want to have some suggestion of the bird being in, at the top of a tree, or at sort of like near the canopy of a tree line. So I wanted to just sort of hint that there are other trees around it, and kind of give the bird some, where is this bird at, basically. And I went with a really warm color. I think I was going for something like an autumn or a sunset, to contrast, like the yellow and the blue I think contrast very well. And I would normally never use a yellow that saturated. That is a very saturated yellow, but I also felt like, well, I don't want to add orange to it, or I don't want to add any red to it, thus turning it orange, because I don't want it to complement the blue feathers of the blue jay too much. So I kind of stuck with this yellow, and I found like, hey, this actually kind of works. And I was also sort of covering up some of the drawing mistakes that I felt that I made with the initial portion of the painting. I felt like the bird's head was just a little too heavy. It felt like the bird was just going to tip over, so I used that yellow, the thickness of the yellow, to kind of slim the bird's neck down just a little bit, very subtly. But sometimes that subtle correction is all you really need to sort of have the rest of the painting click into place. Alright everyone, thanks for watching. Catch you in the next video.